I'm Richard Greenwald, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Fairfield University, and welcome to the first episode of our Dean's series on the future of work, where we'll have conversations with alum and faculty about the changing nature of the workplace and how students can be prepared for that as they go forward. I'm joined today with my partner in crime, a faculty member in the Department of Sociology, who is an expert in the new economy workforce, Mehmet Cansoy, and our alum expert, in the history of work and this sort of evolution and the future of work is Jerry Buckley, who's a graduate of the class of 1966, graduate of the University of Virginia Law School, has spent some time as a VISTA volunteer as well as staff for various congressional committees, including the Senate Banking Committee, where you were, one of the lead staff members there, and then worked for quite some time in the private sector and the law firms. And really, Jerry is what one could honestly say the dean of financial services regulation, and that you spent most of your career looking at that issue. So we're going to start to talk about some of that and the impact that changes in technology will have in the workplace, and particularly in regulation and economic matters. But as a start, can you tell us a little bit about, your how the sort of what we think of as enduring questions that we challenge our students with, how those, how that educational experience you had as an undergraduate propelled you and stayed with you as you worked in various areas?
Well, thank you, first of all, Richard, for inviting me to be a guest on this series. It's an honor to be with you and to be back at my alma mater, which I love. Fairfield, when I got here, was a lot smaller. The library was in the basement of Canisius Hall, where your office is next door, I guess.
Yep.
And we were, I was a day hop. I came from Stratford with colleagues, and there are many who followed that path. I had the honor today of visiting the Bellarmine campus, and the Bellarmine campus is serving today's day hops, students who are coming there from families that didn't have a lot of resources and being given the access to a Jesuit education and the great philosophy, theology, and other courses that were foundational for me. I think that the thing about my Fairfield experience was that I didn't just acquire knowledge, but because of the courses I had in philosophy, theology, history, literature, sciences, I learned to ask questions, to think critically, and that has helped me throughout my life. I also think, which was a very important part of the education we get here at Fairfield, I also learned to feel. I learned to feel compassion for others. And that part, the combination of the thinking and the feeling, and that life lesson that we learned here at Fairfield carries people through life and influences every aspect of their life. And I'm very grateful to have had that opportunity. So yes, I went on to law school. I didn't like law school as much as I liked Fairfield. Fairfield was fun because you were really exploring a lot of ideas, and law school was interesting, but not as interesting as undergraduate school to me. Some people love it. I went on to law first to work in the Congress, and again, the opportunity to think about how things should be. And in the days when I worked in the Congress, there was a lot more collaboration between political parties. So we were able to get things done. And then there was the ideas that you had that you could bring to reality by drafting legislation. One of the bills that I drafted was mentioned in the State of the Union address. It was very exciting. It was like being on a campus there at the Capitol and having an education. I was on the banking committee staff, and we would have the chairman of the Federal Reserve, the leading economist in the country coming in. It was like getting a graduate degree in finance. So I loved that experience. And actually, I invited Joan Walters, who was on the faculty here and had taught me economics, to be one of the presenters before the Senate Banking Committee, which was really fun to do. But anyway, yes, that foundational understanding and inquiry has influenced me throughout my life.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. And we're going to talk about how you bring that into the work that you do. And, we'll also look at some of the changes that are happening in the economy and in workplaces and financial services in particular. So many of our students go into financial services. So I think this will be a real fruitful conversation. Mehmet, do you have a question?
Jerry, you mentioned how the values you got here at Fairfield are so critical, that ability to ask the questions, to engage with philosophy and theology issues, not necessarily because you end up doing that, but because those skills really transfer across so many different domains, right? And I think over the last few years, the changes we've done on the campus with the adoption of our new Magis Core, with a renewed emphasis on the classical liberal education that I think still lies at the heart of what we do here. Not that I've been here that long, but that I've really learned to appreciate both at my home institution at Boston College and here, really like point to that true line, right? Like it's been 60-ish years, but we still do the same things for our students.
It's wonderful. That great Jesuit tradition is carried on.
So I want to just get into some of the meat of what we want to talk about. And that is, there's so much going on in the financial services realm, in banking and finance, and also in the legal profession. Right? We have a large number of students who are interested in careers in law. We have a very strong pre-law society where we work and mentor students. And I'm wondering, sitting where you are right now, looking at the sort of generative AI trends, looking at regulations, changes in administration, and sort of how do you see, where do you see the future of the legal profession? What changes do you sort of see, in the next 5+ years?
I as a practicing lawyer, I am a user of generative AI. My law firm, Oric Herring Sutcliffe, is one of the leading tech law firms in the country. I had a smaller law firm called Buckley LLP, which we 2 years ago merged into Oric, and we were a financial services firm doing a lot of fintech. It's been a great combination because now we're serving the largest tech companies in the country, and they also are looking at financial services. So what do I see for lawyers and for young people considering moving forward? I am using generative AI to get preliminary information. It's a hugely useful research tool. Let me caution that there, if I can, the prospect of hallucination. And I may have mentioned this to you, Richard, but it's not complimentary to Fairfield as it should be. But when I egotistically asked, who is Jeremiah Buckley, it said he is a prominent financial services lawyer. Right on. And he's a graduate of the University of Virginia Law School. Very good. And he went to Georgetown undergraduate. And he wrote these books. Well, I did write one book, but the books they attributed to me weren't true. So clearly generative AI is capable of hallucination, and but it is a good starting point what will it mean? I think we're all trying to figure out what it will mean for the profession, not in terms of the work that lawyers do, but in terms of the need for as many personnel. And will it simply empower people to do a better job faster and less expensively, because law firms are very expensive? Can we offer those services in a better way and more affordably, and offer more affordable services to more people? A large swath of American society does not have access to law. Yes, our clients, the big guys, do. But can we find a way to bring legal services to a larger swath of society? I think generative AI may hold that prospect. But in the meantime, if I'm a pre-law student at Fairfield, I'm thinking about, well, what are going to be the demands for my services? And when I'm going to maybe incur debt going to law school, am I going to be able to pay that debt off? That's a tough question, because we don't know the extent to which we will be actually hiring new people at very high salaries. I mean, first-year lawyers make more than many doctors do after many years of residency and so forth. So will that continue? I am not sure. I think it might. We certainly need very talented people, and there are, but it's, and then, okay, so there are opportunities beyond the big law firms. There also are opportunities for companies in-house to develop more capabilities using generative AI. So it may create more opportunities outside the law firm context. But I think it will. None of us really know where this is headed, but it's clearly going to be somewhat disruptive over time. It may be enhancing opportunities. It may be diminishing opportunities. You know, when you look at the agricultural sector in the United States, probably 40% of the country in 1900 was employed in agriculture. Today, it's maybe 5%.
Half a percent.
Yeah. Yeah.
0.5%?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you can speak to this better than I can. So what's your thought?
So I think you did a really good way of introducing some potentials and some possible pitfalls of this issue. I think, well, there are a couple of things. In the shorter term, the whole legal profession is built around so many of these, like basically stipulations that the buck does stop with the lawyer, right? Like you can, if on a criminal case, you can say I had ineffective counsel, and that's grounds for retrial at the end of the day. So I don't see generative AI being included in that system of law yet, right? Like where you can say, oh, I asked ChatGPT to write me a defense, and well, here I am sentenced to 20 years and I don't know what to do. That will be a problem. But I think the types of disruptions you're mentioning might be in it for the longer term, right? Like if we do make, again, I don't want to use ChatGPT because I don't think that's the future, but these smaller, more targeted chatbots as like specifically trained for the job, and that does make law more accessible, cheaper for more folks. I think that's going to be a big disruption. You're right. Like maybe not next year, but 10 years from now, will we hire as many lawyers at as many competitive salaries is a big and important question to be asking.
Yeah. You know, one of the questions, when I can give an issue to one of the generative AI tools that is deliberately focused on law as opposed to ChatGPT. We have our own Auric AI. There's a Harvey, which is created by another law firm, which is somewhat widely used. And you can give a question, and the art of asking the question properly is a key art. But once you ask that question, it can give you amazingly, a memo that is about as good as a first-year law associate will give you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't have mistakes, but so does the memo from the first-year law student.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've generated that quickly. And when clients are paying, $1,000, $1,500 an hour for your time, getting that, and for the associates, somewhere in the range of $700 an hour, which is amazing. That is, I hope my friends in the legal profession aren't listening. That is a huge savings. Now, that doesn't mean you wouldn't have a first-year associate create that and charge them with
the accuracy
yeah. and so forth, and they're going to be responsible, and their ultimate career is on the line.
Yeah,
but it still will be done much more quickly, and that is something that may happen. Now, the question of hallucination. My colleagues and I have created, this is not an ad, have created a huge database of the consumer financial services laws at the state and federal level. They were created by hand by lawyers over a number of years. And that database, which is called Winnow, is you can go into it and say, I want to offer mortgages in California, Arizona, and Nevada. I am a state-chartered bank in California. I have, that's it. And what rules are applicable to me? And all the rules that are applicable to you come up. Now, you say, well, how do you know that isn't hallucinating? Well, the difference is that you have a walled garden. You have this database that has been curated, and the generative AI tool is focused only on that. And so there will be very big opportunities for people to understand better and rapidly what is required. These things cost, these kind of surveys cost thousands and thousands of dollars to do. If you can get it done relatively quickly by a subscription, you're in much better shape.
But listening to this, so it was probably thousands of hours of lawyer time to build this. Now the regulatory world changes rapidly and in multiple places. So, maybe the first year, associate isn't as necessary doing that, but maybe they are necessary in harnessing and updating that system.
You're right, Richard. And so the initial, because I had a smaller law firm, about 140 lawyers, my colleagues were able to invest the time, which a larger law firm might not do, and to create this database. It is maintained by about 3 lawyers. So every time a law changes, if you have done a survey, you will get you'll get a notice that week that the law has changed. There'll be a red line which shows you what changes were made, and you've now updated your survey. Well, we have to do that, because if we don't do that, the thing is worthless. But as a result, you have an evergreen survey. When you did surveys with law firms before, you would commission a survey, you'd spend $75,000 or $100,000 on the survey, and within a year or two, within months, it might be out of date. So you have an evergreen and comprehensive survey which looks at all the laws that are applicable to you at the state or federal level. It's an extraordinary resource, but I wonder how many other professions or aspects of the law will create that kind of database. People will create databases using AI, but that's a little different than curated by hand databases. So it'll be interesting to see how that all evolves.
Absolutely. And I think the walled garden metaphor is the right one here, right? Because again, for the legal services profession, you need that garden to be walled. If a topic recognition algorithm is pulling stuff from the text of the law, there's no guarantee that it's going to pull everything that's relevant, or that everything it's pulling is going to be relevant. So that becomes a big problem, especially over time, because some randomness has to be built into these algorithms. So over time, if the garden is not actually walled, if there's not actual human supervision, the results become less and less reliable. So I think you're very right, Jerry, that the legal associates will have to put in the time. They'll have to put their careers in line, their personal malpractice insurance in line to make sure that the service is actually feasible.
But when you think about it, if we are able to, and now moving from the walled garden to back to the use of generative AI generally, it may be that there will be quite a few opportunities, maybe not at the same high level of compensation, but a lot of opportunity to deliver quality legal services to a larger number of people in our society, both advisory and if you go to a lawyer, kind of like going to the surgeon for an operation, you go to the lawyer when I've got to sue somebody or I'm going to get a divorce or I'm going to do some other legal, but being able to go for advice and, before a problem exists, that's something people don't do because it's too expensive. Right. Can we make it within the range of the ordinary person to have the benefit of a counselor? Right. That would be great if we could.
Yeah, and that's always the promise of technology. It will democratize information, and it sometimes doesn't work out that way.
It's
So I want to also pivot, unless Mevit, you want to. So, one of the areas you spent a lot of time dealing with is, legal compliance issues, right? And that has changed over time. And it seems every Congress, every administration changes regulations. So, what do you see happening in terms of financial regulation going forward, and how will that impact the financial services industry itself?
Well, first of all, Richard, I think you're right. We have changes of administration and therefore changes in the enforcement policy, and what was okay under one may be not okay under the other. It's not black and white, but it is often just a question of emphasis, and so that and a lack of consistency. The law is supposed to be a consistent guide. So if you don't have a guide, or if you can't rely on the guide, that's not good. So yes, there is that issue. It's a political issue, a policy issue. But beyond that, change is also necessary. And I was present when on the Senate Banking Committee staff when most of the laws that now regulate consumer financial services were written. The Truth in Lending Act, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, the Truth in Lending, or RESPA. There are a series of statutes that were passed when Senator William Proxmire was chairman of the committee and my boss, Senator Ed Brooke, was the ranking member. Those laws were passed at a time when they were intended to be paper-based disclosures. One side of it is the fairness side. You'll have to treat people equally. That shouldn't change. But the disclosures are about as clear as a foggy morning in San Francisco. Do you really, do our listeners read them and find them helpful in shopping or understanding the credit decisions that were made about them? I really don't think so. So, and as I say, they were written at a time when the mainframe computers at the Defense Department didn't have the effectiveness of a handheld phone today. So I think we can change. I think we ought to revisit the consumer financial protections and look at what if I could access all my financial data that's out there. And there's a new regulation that came out that is going to ultimately allow you to access that all. What if I could have an app that would be able to look at that. And if I said, I want a mortgage loan, it could look at my financial situation, say, here are the options, and actually guide me to the product that would be best for me. And then, what if it could, in addition, make the application for the loan for me, handle the closing of the loan for me, and make it something that I had, that now only the richest people in our society have access to that kind of service by employing people. If we could create an app that could do all these things and democratize financial services, consumer protection through an app, that would be extraordinary. I don't say that's today, but we should be thinking, I believe we should be thinking about the future and how we can facilitate and empower consumers using the technology which we've developed. And I believe that will be possible. I believe it'll be possible within a shorter time than most people think. But that means maybe we have to think about all those statutes that I helped to put on the books and ask, do they have to be amended? We are in a time when technology is going to bring about a lot of change. We're in a time of political upheaval. I'm not going to get into politics, but it is a time of political upheaval. I don't know whether the country will be ready for making these changes or not, but I think there's something we should definitely be thinking about, and it could make an enormous difference in people's lives.
So I definitely agree, Jerry, that there's a lot of room for change. As someone who's bought a house twice in the last couple of years, I know how meaningless some of those disclosures have become. They're more like the financial institutions protecting themselves than informing you of anything.
And we lawyers are writing all those things in so you protect yourself. Yeah, an interesting question. You got your mortgage. How did you decide what mortgage company you were going to go to?
I did a couple of online ones. I shopped around for rates and stuff, and then our real estate agent knew a broker that gave us a better deal than anyone else could.
All right.
Online. Yeah.
That's about the way most people do it, and it's good.
Yeah.
But wouldn't you feel more confident if you had searched all opportunities and it wasn't just your realtor, and maybe it's his friend who's the broker, and they send business back and forth? How do you know? I mean, I'm sure you got a good rate, but what if you had an app that could search everything and find the right solution for you? That would be kind of exciting, and you could still have there are a number of questions in the context that I've just suggested. One is, will there be any more arenas named after banks?
Yeah.
But the other question is, and it's one that goes back to our initial Fairfield discussion, do you want someone you can trust, who you can talk to, in addition to the access to an app that might, do everything you'd need? Wouldn't you want the ability to, at least I would, as an older person, want to be able to have a conversation with somebody? What do you think? Do you agree? And so forth. But then the other question which would arise in this context is, and which is related to my profession, is how are we going to regulate?
That's the big question.
Who will guard the guards themselves? Who will, remember, what was it?
Qui custodiet et custodes.
Exactly, yes, to get back to our Latin
roots.
Yeah,
good little bit.
Yes, very good. So how will we regulate the providers of these apps? Will the providers of these apps be the banks or third parties or both? We don't know.
Yeah. And that's the really big question, right? Because you can say you're building the best financial advisor app, bot, chatbot, whatever out there, But we know that commercial interests are going to bias which options are going to be presented to you. We know that advertising is going to bias it. We know that banks will, like they pay Google to be up on the search results, they're going to pay.
Well, so that will be, the question will be, will the world of regulation
Keep up.
specify that you cannot buy access to a consumer if you're not offering the best product? You can't, or maybe you can't even pay anything to have a referral. These rules for a new world are, and what I find fascinating is that we're going to have to think this through. Mm-hmm. And I think I think we have to have consumers, we have to have regulators, we have to have lawyers, we have to have data scientists.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We have to have people who are going to come together and think about, what does this brave new world look like if we're going to proceed there? I think we are going to proceed there. We may, as often happens, proceed there by,
fits and starts.
Fits and starts. I think it would be better if we thought the whole thing through, but that doesn't always
it's interesting
happen.
to listen to the conversation, because I kept coming back to, there are no easy answers, right? But there are questions that are enduring, right? There are questions that we're constantly asking. So I'm a historian by training who studied work, and work has always been transformed, right? There's always been technology of some kind that's been disruptive in, both, I studied the freelance economy and the sort of the new gig economy. And so there's a lot of, technology and, sort of economic entrepreneurial sort of spirit, but also constraints and risks, right? So, getting back to how we started the conversation about rooting the educational experience in asking those questions continually, because the answers are going to change, right? So if we were to come back in 5 years and have that conversation, the world would look different, right? There'd be new regulation. There might be a whole new world of AI that is more complex and more sophisticated, right? So I think it's very difficult sometimes to convince students that the questions and the ability to ask those questions are sometimes more important than the momentary answers.
Completely.
Right? So I wonder how, in your day-to-day work in a large law firm with a lot of lawyers and a lot of associates, how do you motivate them to continually ask those questions instead of, these are all very smart people, highly educated individuals, how do you get them to sort of pause to think about those big questions?
Well, how do you differentiate one law firm from another? And the way you do it is by being creative in finding answers that may not be as apparent to others. So if you can inculcate in all the lawyers in the firm, partners and associates, the sense that we want to be viewed as not outliers. There are plenty of law firms that are willing to say, unfortunately, hey, that's okay if you want to do it. Hire me. That's always a temptation. I think that the enduring nature of the law practice that we had at Buckley and now at Orrick is probably the largest consumer financial services law practice in the country. And we grew to that by being straight down the fairway. People knew they were less likely to get in trouble. Now, there were people who would veer off and say, hey, I want the answer I want because I'm going to make more money in the short run with that. But the people who come to us on a long-term basis have felt that we were finding our way down the middle. But that does not mean not being creative. That does not mean not asking questions that others are not asking. So we are always looking for a better way to solve the problem. And so that creativity is, that challenge to creativity is always there. I think that'll,
yeah. And so, thinking back, to, both Mehmet and I teach, and I'm teaching an honors seminar called Enduring Questions, and so that's something that I'm thinking about an awful lot. The other thing, is what are the skills that you see students needing, right, to be engaged in this world that's so fast moving, right? It does seem that things have sped up, that it used to take 10 plus years for technological change to sort of happen, and now it happens, in 6 weeks, right? So what advice would you have for students on what to focus in on now that will have an impact as they go through their education?
Well, I think coming back to the enduring values, enduring principles, perhaps, I think it's they do need to develop critical thinking capabilities. That will differentiate them from their peers. That's what I hope Fairfield is giving people, that makes them valuable to people on Wall Street. And we send a lot of people to Wall Street, to banks, to law firms. If they have that ability to challenge ideas, to not accept the received wisdom, to be more creative than the next person, that will be a differentiator for them in life and in their careers. It also, you cannot fail. You can't only have that. You do have to be engaged in the world. And that's where what you're doing is so important to the students, because they are taking those enduring values and principles and capabilities and applying and encountering them in a real world context. I'm sure I'm not a scientist. My daughter was a biology major. Some of my children are involved in science, but I am not a scientist. But I'm sure the same issues, that same use of the Socratic method and the hypothesis and process, that scientific process is, I'm sure, being developed. I'd be interested in your thoughts about, beyond the professions that we are talking about, finance, law, in other aspects of what Fairfield is offering to its students. How are they dealing with what the future is going to be? What do they think? And what are you trying to give them as the tools to move ahead?
I mean, very similar ideas, I would say. Basically, again, professional schools might think differently, but over on this side of the campus, I think we do try to focus on a basic set of abilities to ask questions about new stuff that they encounter in the world. What are interesting questions? What are the important questions to ask? And then what are the tools you can use to answer those? Because, again, like Richard said, it's kind of foolish to try to predict, hey, here is everything you need to learn for the next 40 years of your professional life. It just doesn't work anymore. So, I'm a sociologist by training. We talk to people. That's been the method in my field for more than 100 years now. But everyone in my generation had to learn how to do statistics. And then maybe a few years after me, everyone had to learn how to do computer code programming, because the state of the field has shifted completely. So, and again, that means if you're open to learning new things and saying, okay, there's this new thing, what does it mean for me? How can I answer that question? So everything from being media literate to scientific method literate will get you those answers eventually. So I think that's the focus we have over at the college. And I hope it's serving our students very well.
And I think, Mehmet, you're being a little modest, but one of the things that we have done, and Mehmet has been involved in the Frederickson Family Innovation Lab, is getting students to think about data and data integrity, and sort of asking the questions about what can this data set tell us, right? What does it miss? What's the bias? that's in that.
What's not in there.
Right. So, and again, having them from an ethical standpoint look at, the results, right? And, that's, I think, an important part, because there is a tendency to look at new technology as this golden halo, right? It is new, it is shiny, it's going to do all sorts of things, forgetting that it's built by people who have flaws and have interests and, don't foresee downhill consequences, right? There's lots of examples of really great technology not being used, smartly because no one thought about a bias that was in it, or a missing data set, or not having the deep question, right? So it is the technical skills, and I know you teach R and all sorts of programming languages, but it's also, as you said, the ability to ask the question, right? Where do I find this answer, and what's going to be limited about this data set?
That is, and you're doing that in the innovation lab.
Innovation lab and like regular courses as well. We're
Right.
trying to build it out to the curriculum.
That is, I think that you're, for whatever I think you're absolutely on the right path. It's interesting. The other question is, how do you humanize the results? In financial services, the area I most focused on, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act and the Fair Credit Reporting Act require that if you deny a person credit, or you give them credit at less than optimal terms, you have to give them the reason. The question is, when you're using AI, it isn't sufficient, I think, to say the black box told me that this is what should happen. So one of the great challenges is going to be to translate. Currently, you could give broad reasons why. Would this app that I described be able to make enough inquiry so that you could see what is it actually that I could change in my financial profile, or I can't change? Perhaps I'm not going to have the income to be able to afford this, but so let's know that it was that. But maybe it is that I have too many credit lines. Should I reduce them? Can I get more information that is humanly understandable and actionable? And I think that's going to be an issue that goes beyond financial institutions, financial services. But actually, I think financial services in some way leads the way with these laws that require this, and how we implement those laws. The same might be true in medicine or in other professions. How do we can we take what is an analysis and bring it down to, it's not going to be perfect, but bring it down to humanly understandable terms?
Absolutely. And some of that's going to be built on, our current system is doing a bad job at this too, right? You mentioned the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. There's been so many lawsuits around it because, banks, when they're making these decisions, have access to flawed data that turns out has so much racial bias in it that they have to be sued.
Yeah. Now, that isn't bad for our law firm because we're defending those lawsuits. But the fact is that I think there'd be less opportunity to be sued if, instead of giving generic answers, instead of relying on generic disclosures, we actually got down to saying, here is why you. That's
specifically,
where this specifically did not get this credit. And, if you had this app that I'm envisioning that was able to act for you in getting the information and translate it, or insist on a translation from the provider who is denying credit, you would be much better off. So maybe that's achievable. I'm not sure, but I think it might be.
But the way you're envisioning this, I can also see a host of jobs and careers that don't exist because, let's say, someone does apply for a mortgage, does not get the rate that they want to, decides I'm not going to do this now, I need to work on my credit, or right, and the app tells you where the problems are, but what's the roadmap to improve? So I
could
can
also
see,
give you that.
but I can see an advisor. I could see, there's a host of other services that don't even exist. I mean, I think you probably know this better than I do. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has sort of said that the average college student now graduating would have 12 jobs and 7 careers or something close to that.
Yeah,
right?
Turnover rate is 3.5 years or so, roughly.
And some of those careers don't even exist, right? So we don't know, what students will have. So getting back to this notion of asking those deep questions, being open to learning and being flexible and fluid to move into that sort of new territory of being creative, I think is a great skill set. And I would argue that's why the liberal arts have endured for as long as they have.
May they endure forever.
Yes. Well, I think that is the sentiment that we should end this discussion on. So thank you, Mehmet. Thank you, Jerry, for coming back to your home, your campus, and for being so generous and sharing your time and knowledge with us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been an honor and pleasure to be with both of you.
Thank you, Jerry. It was a pleasure to share the stage with you. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you.